Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, and welcome back. Welcome back to our plenary session here, our keynote lunch. I hope you're all having a great morning here so far. I hope you've had plenty of opportunity to talk with your colleagues. Let's go ahead and begin our program. I'm going to ask you to bring your attention here because we've got a very special guest I want to bring up here in just a moment. And we will have plenty of time to talk all day, we promise you. That's why we get together. I know that the sessions are an excuse, or the conversation is really why you're here. So we're going to move forward with our program, and hopefully we can get everybody's attention to the screen here today. So welcome back. I'm Stephen Russell, Executive Director of the San Diego Housing Federation. I do hope you had a wonderful morning session. A couple of housekeeping things. For those of you who are looking for sessions in the Aqua level, the Aqua level is right up that one set of escalators. Just go right up the escalators, follow the signage, you'll find it there. Parking, if you want the discounted parking for the conference, please see the validator in the lobby, right by where we did registration this morning. They'll be able to help you out. They should be there starting at 12:30. They'll be out there at the table and we'll validate your parking. You need that before you go through the parking structure if you want to get the special price. Also, please don't forget to pick up your bag. We have great tote bags sponsored by Allgaier Construction. These are durable bags intended to be used time and time again. They are environmentally conscious, and you can show your pride in the movement, in the affordable housing movement, when you use that bag every day. So many of you know that the work and the mission of the San Diego Housing Federation quite well, but we're also pleased to welcome many newcomers to our 2019 annual conference. Whether this is your first or your 29th year with us, hopefully you're learning a great deal, engaging in provocative conversations about the present and future of affordable housing in San Diego, and meeting and connecting with great leaders and partners that will support you in your work. The San Diego Housing Federation was established in 1990 with the goal of strengthening the nonprofit affordable housing sector in San Diego County. For nearly 30 years, we have been the leading voice dedicated to the promotion and advancement of policies and programs that help our region build and preserve affordable homes that it so desperately needs. And we do this in a number of different ways. By providing education and capacity building to those who build, finance, and advocate for affordable homes, by educating the public and elected officials on the importance and positive impact of affordable housing, and by advocating for policies that support our critical work. Our membership includes nearly 200 of the county's affordable housing developers, funders, development partners, service providers, nonprofit advocacy organizations, and individual advocates. Our work would not be possible without the support of our members and donors, and I want to thank everyone who supports the San Diego Housing Federation today and every day of the year. If your organization is not a member of the Federation, you certainly should be. So I invite you to visit our website, housingsandiego.org, to learn more about how you can get involved and access the benefits of membership. So thank you to our supporting organizations of the Federation, and thanks right now to our lunch sponsor, US Bank. Let's give US Bank a big hand. And please continue to enjoy the meal while we go on with today's keynote session. And I should ask whether you've been posting on social media. It's amazing to be able to scroll through our hashtag Building a Movement and see the conversations that are originating here. So don't be shy, keep posting. And I also guess you're going to be making good use of our Wi-Fi. If you haven't yet, the password is Redstone, sponsored by Redstone Equity. It's Redstone in all lowercase letters. And please, use the Whova app. If you have not tried it yet, I recommend it. It is a really nimble way of understanding what's happening here today and connecting with other people who are here today. You can connect with everybody who signed in. If you want to use the Whova app, download the app and use the invitation code SDHF19. It's 2019. SDHF all in caps and 19. Now we really should appreciate how much planning, vision, and effort goes into making an event like this a success. A group of very talented and dedicated individuals committed a great deal of time over the past few months to develop the program, secure inspiring presenters and speakers, invite conference supporters to sponsor the event, and to help this conference be successful. So could I ask that the members of the 2019 Affordable Housing and Community Development Conference Planning Committee please stand. The Planning Committee, let's give them all a big hand. Thank you very much. Another group of talented and dedicated individuals to recognize are those who I have the honor to serve for, which is the members of the San Diego Housing Federation Board of Directors. Could I ask the members of the 2019 Board of Directors of the San Diego Housing Federation, please stand. Will you please join me in recognizing all of them? And every year, a group of amazing individuals comes forward to lend their time and talent to this event as volunteers, and I don't think we could ask for a more intelligent or dedicated team. If you were a volunteer this year, would you please stand, and will the audience please join me in applauding the volunteers who are here working today. I also want to thank the Housing Federation staff for all of your hard work in planning this event and executing it so seamlessly. And so let's give a hand for the staff of the Federation. And finally, I want to recognize we have special guests joined us by surprise. Councilmember Chris Ward, who is a leader on the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. He is a leader in bringing forward the action plan for homelessness in the city of San Diego, and he is our council champion for the $900 million Homes for San Diego bond measure. One more hand for Councilmember Chris Ward. So with that, I'm going to move on here. And we're going to move to the next speaker. We're very appreciative of our lunch keynote sponsor, Sun Country Builders. And so please join me in welcoming Peter Bridge, Director of Client Relations for Sun Country Builders, to the podium to share some remarks. Peter, come on up here.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I'm Peter Bridge with Sun Country Builders, and now you can hear me. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here today and to catch up with very good friends and colleagues in affordable housing. Sun Country Builders has supported affordable housing public policy for decades now. That's why we support the San Diego Housing Federation, and that's why we elected this year to underwrite the lunch keynote speaker. I'm now going to hand the microphone to Nancy Sasaki of United Way San Diego County, the president of United Way San Diego. Nancy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's really great to be here with all of y'all today. I get the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, who I actually just met, but I love that he's a colleague of mine in the United Way worldwide work that we're doing. So Chris Coe is the Managing Director of Homelessness and Strategic Initiatives for the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. But way back when, after meeting him, I'm not so sure it was so long ago, because he was named one of Next City's 40 Under 40 Vanguards, the Empowerment Congress 40 Under 40 Civic Leaders, and one of Stratoscope's Impact Makers to Watch. So it looks like he's still under 40, but you know how you hear about people getting those kinds of awards and you think like, are they going to really do anything or amount to anything? It's like always great to recognize them, but you always wonder. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what he has done. He took a turn in politics by serving in the mayor's office in West Philadelphia, and then he left there and came to Los Angeles, where he was an economic development policy aide, where he launched the Bank of Los Angeles's initiative that brought 10,000 plus Angelenos in the financial mainstream. He was a public affairs leadership fellow working on special projects for the district attorney. Was that Eric Garcetti? Oh, okay. And the City Workers Labor Union, NPR, and the LA School District. But then he got really smart, and he got out of politics. He started working with the United Way of Greater Los Angeles, and in his role, he leads California's broadest community-based effort to end homelessness. He doubled participation in their homeless count, and can you imagine Los Angeles County having to do their homeless count and how many they need? Beyond that, he led the development of LA's region's coordinated entry system, which went on to become a national model. So now that y'all are really crazy ready to know what else he has up his sleeve to accomplish, help me welcome Chris Coe.
Thank you, thank you. I am just slightly under 40 years old, but I'm also Asian, so it doubles that. But thank you so much to the Federation, to you all for being here, to Peter, thank you so much for making this keynote possible. Good afternoon, San Diego. So I hear you want to start a movement. I am thrilled, excited, and honored to speak to that and share our own experiences with that. What I am terrified by is subjecting you to 40 minutes of me, and I am also terrified of competing with chicken on the plate, but hopefully all of that comes together. So hope you're ready, because in 40 minutes you will both be full and a movement will have been birthed, and we can all go home and we can call it a day. But thank you. What Nancy forgot to mention is that probably my proudest accomplishment is that my parents accidentally named me after a cooking oil. So that's probably the easiest way to remember my name. But it is fantastic to be with you all, and hopefully our time together will be well spent. So launching into it, a lot of people ask us what to do to pass ballot measures like we did in Los Angeles. Just as a context note, we did two. So Proposition HHH was a housing bond, kind of like the one that you're considering here, $1.2 billion for 10,000 units. Measure H was a countywide sales tax that funded the supports to help people go into that housing and also to stay there and thrive and all of the services around. So those two things came together months later into this happy picture, and people are always wondering how to get to that happy picture. And we often say the work started 10 years ago, but the work did not start as intentionally as I would say it's starting here now. I would say largely we stumbled into that by accident. If you know anything about United Way, you might be surprised to know that we actually started out as that. So we had two priests, a rabbi, a civic leader walk into a room to talk about how might community change and what they might do. And the first thing they thought of was we can collect funds together, we can work as an arm of the chamber and all of the charities that come to it. And so for years, we were the community chest. We were that box there. And for years we did that, and then as we started giving money away, people started saying, well, the things you do with your money, we would like more than just your money to do, and it's taking more than money to enact the changes you want of us. And so about 10 years ago, we embarked on a plan to focus our work and really drill down into a few areas. What you will notice, and these were the three areas we decided on, what you will notice is that ending homelessness is not on that list. In fact, it barely made it onto the page as a bullet that said reduce homelessness. And it only made it onto that page because our CEO, Elise Buick, fought for it despite some questions from the staff about how viable that was. So it made it onto the page as reduce homelessness, nothing more. But right as it did that, this was around 2005-06, we saw the first homeless count in Los Angeles. So the homeless count, which may feel like it's been something that's been around for forever, it's actually something that we created in fairly modern times together in this country. And that HUD mandate led to our first homeless count, and we found 90,000 people. And when you see a number that large in a newspaper, people try to react and people react. And so all over, we had various groups. I was working for Mayor Villaraigosa at that time. There are a lot of people stepping out to try to respond to it, but our continuum of care, LAHSA, at that point was under fiscal conservatorship for some question. So there was this vacuum, and there was this question of who is going to do what. And along that span, we had a board member who asked us, hey, they're doing this walk in Washington, D.C. What might it look like for us to do one in Los Angeles, given the obvious crisis in our area? So we accidentally stumbled into this work, I would say. It started as a bullet on a page, organized a walk because it seemed like a good idea, and 3,000 people showed up, which was probably 2,500 more than we expected. And part of that walk also led to funds that were raised, and with the people and the funds, there's this question of what does a solution look like to this pressing issue. So we partnered with a leadership task force of the Chamber of Commerce at that time to take up the charge to look at this issue. And what they did was go around the country looking at what else other people had done. And what they found were two things. One, that the needle moved when people started pointing the finger at themselves and not someone else. So especially when the business community got part of it and said, what can we do? How can we explore? And it was actually critical to let our business leaders and our friends explore the idea for themselves at that time. Early on, the chair of our task force, Jerry Newman, who's now the chair of the area Chamber of Commerce, said, let us make our own conclusions. Let us see for ourselves what works. So they visited shelters, they visited housing, they visited transitional housing. And when they came back to the conclusion that we all know so well, that was a little bit more provocative at that time, which is that supportive housing and housing first works. And out of that, they released a cost study and launched a plan to put that plan into action and launching that for our area. What that led to then was putting one of the first things in the plan was to then create a form of housing and create a tenant-based form of supportive housing to actually increase this class of housing. How might we have Section 8 vouchers from the Housing Authority really go to this population en masse? And how might we use private funds to really spark that and stitch the city and the county together? So with the challenge grant from philanthropic partners and a founding pioneering grant from the Conrad and Hilton Foundation, we were off. We created a set aside of 500 supportive housing vouchers, creating the first tenant-based supportive housing program in Los Angeles. And that felt monumental. I mean, that felt like we have arrived, we are gonna end homelessness, it's all gonna be grand. But as we did that, we realized there's a second step, which is you can have the resources and it saves money, but you have to be more diligent about who gets those resources and how might we move from a system of waiting lists to really prioritize targeted care. So that was behind then launching the coordinated entry system to figure out how we might do that. And we were doing all that and we were feeling tremendous about it. And then the 2016 homeless count came out, which, as you see, went up despite all those things that we just talked about. And that moment was a real reckoning point for us as someone who is committed to ending chronic and veteran homelessness to ask ourselves the honest question, what are we not doing? What are we not looking at? What's really going on here? When we looked at the numbers, we saw a couple things. One, which was the fact that even though the homeless count overall went up, it actually went down for the populations that we were applying these approaches for and securing these resources for. So there was proof even within the larger picture that the solutions we were talking about were working. And when I looked at it and when I trended it over a few years, what I realized was that our theory of change originally was how can we speed up the system? How do we make efficient use of all the resources we have? How do we do all that to really impact this issue? But when we looked at the numbers, what we found out was that you can do all of that, you can speed all of that up, and that is critical to the work, and it helps so tremendously. But at the end of the day, the most critical thing you can have is what? A home, right? Having a place at the other end of it is what makes all of that possible. For every voucher we secured, for every housing unit we created, in 2 years, if you looked and trended 250 units, one here, 500 units, one here, you saw that count go down in the next year or two by that same exact number. And when I looked at that, it struck me that we were fighting for things on the wrong order of magnitude. So even when the system is underperforming, if you have the housing, it is a boost to the entire system that raises everything up and makes these numbers go in the opposite direction. But what we weren't doing, we were looking at 500 or even 1,000, and we were feeling tremendous about that, but we weren't really taking seriously the scale of the issue. And so we pushed together to create larger stakes in the ground. Our city and the county, for the first time, came out with coordinated, comprehensive, honest assessments. One of the most honest things it did about that, and why I'm so excited for your action plan, is that it actually put numbers behind what the need was. It swallowed hard and looked at how much the cost was, And when we looked at that cost, we realized, yeah, we were off by a magnitude of 10 in terms of the things we were fighting for. And so when we talk about the 10,000 units, it's a very nice, neat number that some people thought we made up. We actually based it in fact. It actually comes from the same kind of gaps analysis that you all are just about to release. It is founded in that reality at that scale, and that's what launched us off. Taking these numbers, we took it back to our home walk, which had grown by that time to become the nation's largest public event on homelessness. And we created a letter together that said, we demand action on this order of magnitude, had 1,000+ letters signed, and took that to the County Board of Supervisors to start our march for this $100+ million effort at that time. So, step one, what do we do to build a movement? Build a base of partners and experiences. As you can see here, this picture, here's a literal picture of what that looks like on a page. So we actually did an affordable housing measure before all of this launched. This is a picture of what that looks like on a page. This was at PATH, which you also have down here. When we launched that measure that failed in a November election, this was the crowd around. After 10 years of work, this is what that launch looked like. And it's no accident that now behind the microphone, you have leaders of smaller regional cities, you have faith leaders, you have business leaders, you have council members, you have the mayor, you have our champion supervisor, Mark Ridley Thomas, you have service providers, persons with lived experience. It was intentionally, over that 10 years, we had grown the gamut. Because truth be told, people think that ballot measures are a little bit like a genie lamp, which is in saying that you feel like you can create something good and get everyone to sign on right away. So a lot of people normally come to us and say at the last minute, how do you get the business community to sign on? We normally say start 10 years ago, because it's really hard to get there and suddenly just ask everyone to jump on board. In fact, ballot measures are more like a microwave. They will take whatever you have, the dynamics in this room and others, and it will amplify them, and it will really bear them out and show what they are to be. So, what I would say is that I would probably not have accepted this keynote and would have felt much worse about it, but for the fact that you have done this already. We can clap for ourselves. Because if you weren't here, the honest truth is that there's nothing a 2-day conference or a 40-minute keynote could do to change that at this point in the arc. So that is critical that you have the space and you have that work to move on, because that truly is part of the work that launched us into the next phase. Because what you do with that is that you then set a path and you walk together. This is a picture of what a campaign feels like, which for any of our elected officials in the room, you can identify with all of that. An election is like nothing you have experienced before, because you put so much time and money into it, and it is pass-fail. There is no B+, there is no good work. You either get it or you don't, and the $1.5 billion you will spend will either have produced something, or it will be a bunch of good stories that you share sometime. And we got sued 2 times. I think I talked to more lawyers in the 9-month span of our campaign than I talked to in the entire course of my life. We had even fun little things like insurance for commercial shoots. It's always the little things that you wouldn't expect. But it is an absolute roller coaster and a thrilling one. A lot of 11 p.m., 6 a.m. calls, meetings, things of every kind. But it is absolutely worth it. This picture comes from this article. I got this picture from this article, which was, the headline was 10 roller coaster safety tips that could save your life. The reason I'm sharing that is the second part of my keynote. I want to share with you not 10, but 7 tips on how you might walk together and set a path and work together. Because it would be beautiful if we were all like birds. if we were like geese and the leader goes off and we naturally flap together and we just, every sensation in our body just draws us to work together. But the downside of our brains being a little bit larger than that of geese is that we have questions, we have opinions, we have great ideas, and sometimes those are the things that make us want to kill each other and not work together. And so I want to share a few things that might be kind of campaign insider playbook sort of things, but hopefully when we discuss them together here, you might better understand or have more patience for the things you see on the campaign. So, number one, learn a new language. We had done all of this over the last 10 years, that, as I explained to you, and we had lots of experiences. I've had lots of experiences sharing the story of homelessness and the work to progress in many rooms like this, smaller rooms, larger rooms, places like Homewalk, where we got 10,000 people together. And so I think for ourselves, we felt fairly prepared for the task of communicating. And if you're anything like me, although I think in builders there's a bit of a mix, you all are better at this than I would be, and certainly those on the investment and finance side, you have this. But I have lived most of my life thinking of things as an art and a little bit as a science, but mostly, kind of the work we do is this creative, artful, human, passionate story. But the reality of a campaign is that there is a lot of science behind it, and there's a lot of things that we can all learn from that might take us time to jog back. So there is a natural evolution to it. There are also some things that may seem jarring. For example, when we pulled and focus grouped a lot of the words we were using and a lot of the concepts we were using, some things came back that surprised us. One, this word, which how many of you would identify as a nonprofit developer? Or you like nonprofit developers, how about that? This word we found out was one of the most confusing or misleading terms for the general public, because we hear this and we think, smart, creative, scrappy, hardworking, sacrificial, builders. What other people hear are incompetent, is what they hear by nonprofit people, and I'll say this since I work for a nonprofit, people who couldn't have gotten a real job, so we work for nonprofits, right? And then on the flip side, developer, which triggers all sorts of things about the greediest people on the face of the planet. So when you combine both, you have incompetent greed, is what people hear from nonprofit developers. So instead, I think we would suggest things like builders, people who create housing, providers of housing, and things like that. Even more sacred, this term literally was foundational to all of our work and was central to a lot of what we did, permanent supportive housing. We found out this term actually put an image in people's minds of being stuck and the people within them being stuck, and really clashed with people's hopes for people. We hear permanent and we think we're conveying stability, recovery, kind of a safe place. People hear it and they think kind of a caged, stuck, solid environment that's hard to get out of. So what people like instead is just supportive housing. And so in those two examples, two pretty monumental things that we had to recondition ourselves to in thinking about this work. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not also a reason for you to bicker with one another when you hear others saying the word, because we will still say PSH, and there are some settings where we'll say permanent supportive housing. But it is important to listen to how other people are listening and to take that into account despite our many years of thinking and working on this issue. One last thing about this. So the second line, for example, I think more than supportive services are on-site case management. We have offices for social workers and clinicians that help our residents thrive and recover and live their best lives. People don't understand what on-site supportive services means, apparently. And the final one, facts do not fight fear. So this is a little bit of a tangent on my point on messaging or language, but who says it can be more important than what is said. So I can tell you that permanent supportive housing or supportive housing is the safest, most catalytic thing that might come to your community. Me telling you versus a police officer telling you is completely different. If a police officer tells you that this is going to be safe and that crime will not be an issue, for whatever reason, people listen to authority significantly. Same thing if a real estate broker or an investor tells you supportive housing does not diminish value, it actually raises value. Completely different story. So the messengers and the cultivation on it will be critically important in this work. 2, keep it human. You all know this, and I think this is something that is undergirding a lot of your work. But one small twist I would say to it is that as you talk about people, you can also message systems and strategies, which are also critical ways to do it. I think in our work, we typically bounce beyond the two, so we talk really wonky about policies, the coordinated entry system, all of this stuff, and then we talk about the human lives. But there is a way to blend the two, and there is a way to talk about, for example, even mundane things like benefits enrollments, and instead of saying that a measure will raise benefits enrollments and create more SOAR teams and things like that, you can talk about, this measure will help veterans like Bob get the benefits that they have fought for and deserve, and really would really change the direction of their lives. So taking a service, a system, and really painting it through the eyes of people, we have found is a critical thing. So for example, we have storytelling events. The Everyone In campaign is something that we launched under the direction of our fabulous friend Tommy Newman, and that is something that as we did it, we started out by typically having just people in our housing, in our homes, and our most valuable voices there. But where I think we grew was adding to that and also having case managers, regional coordinators tell their story. So, for example, as you talk about a housing, in addition to the builders, in addition to our residents, I think a way this could look is having outreach workers, shelter operators, other programs say, I work day in and day out, and you would not imagine the difference it makes when I have a housing resource to provide someone versus when I'm just engaging them and asking for care. So it paints the picture and threads the needle also between the one resource you're talking about, the human being, even if that's the story of the case manager, the outreach worker, and the broader system and the process it takes to go there. Because long-term, what creates change is an understanding of all the things that are in the mix. And if people part of the journey can be growing that understanding of that, it will help in your long-term efforts to combat this issue after you win the ballot measure. 3rd, do not get defensive. This is a key one. I think as we go through the ballot measure, what you may find is that there are people who will talk about everything that's broken and that hasn't worked. And it might be an instinct for you to defend that and say, no, 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 no. We have done such good work. You would not believe everything we've done. Everything is working really well. But what that doesn't do is it gives no place for people to act, and it even confuses people why they might want to even take action. So on the top chart, so this comes from the Frameworks Institute, which is a fantastic communication research company. Nat Kendall Taylor, they did a report with Enterprise on affordable housing communications, and I know they've been down here as well. If you don't let the urgency rise to that level and you keep it on the low level, you will either get questions as to why we're working on this or confusion or boredom as to the stakes at play. On the other hand, if everything is just drama, 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 this is impossible and terrible, you will have a sense of why are we working on this at all? And then the golden unicorn of the quadrant is where you are talking about a serious issue, but you're also talking about a serious solution. So as you dive into this, when someone at a public meeting speaks out about how everything hasn't been working, certainly explain the work and certainly explain yourself, but don't invalidate how serious the problem is and how much work there still is to do, even despite what that might feel like as an indictment of some of the work we've done together. And make it simple, because the work we have done together is broad, expansive, it's complicated, but there are ways to simplify it. When the county released their plan, it was a 100-plus page plan. And it was interesting because early on when we polled and when we were looking at both measures, when we did the housing bond and when we said 10,000 units, it was really clear. And when we looked at the county measure initially, people said it would really help if the county actually had a plan with what it wanted to do with its resources, like the city does. The irony was that the county had actually written a much more extensive and exhaustive, longer plan and spent a lot of time coming up with their plan. But people didn't understand that to be true because there wasn't a pin on it. And so we took and got those 100-plus pages and really narrowed it down and said, we need to have exactly what this will do, and we rounded out with 45,000 homes that it would provide and 30,000 people who would be prevented from entering homelessness. So packaging it down, journaling it down, I know that there will always be something you want to say more about it, but sometimes allowing the simplicity of what something is accomplished to ride through, and realizing that when you're talking to millions of people, a lot of them really are still hearing about this for the first time. And it's hard to kind of take 5 steps with them all at once. Here's an example of how all of that came together. I'm going to do a 6-minute version of this for you, kind of if we were in a public meeting and I had 5 minutes to come, 6, 7 minutes to come and speak, how it sounded for us. So we'd say, on any given night, this past year or last night even, there are over 45,000 people sleeping in their streets, vehicles, and in their cars, and in shelters. Over 3,000 are veterans who have served this country. Nearly 15,000 have a lifelong disabling condition and have been out there for a year or more. The thing, though, is that a lot of you might think this is all about Skid Row. I would ask you a question of what percentage of homelessness you think exists in Skid Row. So what percentage would you say of homelessness exists in Skid Row? 20, 30, 40%. You might be surprised to find out homelessness in LA and Skid Row, this represents less than 10% of the issue. Less than 10% of homelessness in Los Angeles is actually in Skid Row, which means on the flip side, 90% of our issue is actually in everyone's community, yours and mine, all across the county. Homelessness, unfortunately, truly is an issue that affects all of us. I don't need to tell you that. You've seen it, and that's why you're here today. You might instinctively want to reach for things like toughening up the rules, cracking down on street sanitations or other things to address the problem. But here's a map of when San Francisco did that and when one reporter followed where someone went every time sweeps happen. And as you can see, it's just a giant circle. People went from one location to the next location, to the next location, to the next location. They came back. And so what we've found over years of working on this is that sweeping or enforcement or harder rules are not the answer. So what do we do about it? The solution, we wouldn't be here talking with you if there wasn't a solution, and I want to tell you about that through the eyes of someone named Ed. Ed was on our street for over 20 years, and he came to Los Angeles to get a fresh start and thought he could kick his habit, and was out there for years as a result of not having a father in his life and then developing that condition that had gotten so bad that it became a substance use disorder. And there he was, for 20 years. He actually tried to go into programs, transitional programs and others. He tried a couple times. One, he made it 7 or 8 months. The other time, he made it 9 months. Ultimately, he didn't make it in both programs and was out on the street for years. The back of that picture is someplace you might expect people like Ed would go into and could make it out of homelessness with. It's the back of that picture, the brick wall is actually a shelter, where instead of being a point of recovery for him, it was a backdrop to the next 20 years of his life, where he would sleep outside. And when a team found him, he was sick enough where he was even likely to die and pass away if he didn't get into housing and care. But this time, we had a solution for him. We had an outreach team going out to him, to talk to him, to engage with him, even though the first several times he didn't believe us, the same way that you wouldn't believe if you got a flyer in your mail that said free housing. I don't even believe free vacation in my mail, much less free housing. So, if someone's walking the street telling you there's free housing, it's hard to believe sometimes, especially when you have tried other programs and they have told you you're not good enough for that housing. But this housing was different. This housing was meant for people like Ed who had a place for him and really made space and time for his recovery. So he made it inside, and it was hard. It wasn't easy. He wasn't forced into treatment programs, but that didn't mean it came easy. He went in and out of things, and it took him 7 to 9 months to find sobriety, but when he did, and it stuck. And this is Ed today. Yeah. And every day we pass by people like Ed thinking there's nothing that we can do, but I'm here to tell you that there is something that we can do, and that's even been done. And in fact, when we looked at the homeless count last year, even when in the face of overwhelming challenges, when you drill in and you see who it's working for, it's people for whom we have provided solutions like this supportive housing we're talking about for Ed. And it wasn't just a one-time story. We actually have been applying this to veterans across the board. And what we found is that when you actually provide resources, it works. I think the number one question we often get is, when you give resources, doesn't it attract people? I just want to ask you, though, how many of you all are not originally from San Diego? Wow. I would ask myself in LA, and I would raise my hand because I'm also not originally from Los Angeles. And what I would say is the percentage of us that are not from LA or San Diego is actually dramatically higher than the percentage of our homeless friends who are not from this place. It's often the case that we come here for the weather or for the jobs or something else, but it's actually much harder for people experiencing homelessness to make those kind of moves. And yes, some of them do, but for the majority of the fact, these are people who have called these neighborhoods home. And what we've seen when we provide that resource at scale is actually that homelessness goes down. It's not a magnet, and this is actually the only way that when we do it in force and when we do it at scale, we see a solution. We are extremely excited to say that the city is finally putting out a plan to now do this at the scale we need. We have a plan in place, and this proposition is calling for 10,000 of these solutions in these new homes. And even better, these are now being delivered through a community-based resource system we developed that hits every community of this city, and it's delivered by community-based organizations so that people don't have to march in government offices or other places. These are delivered through neighborhoods and organizations that you love and that you know, so that our community-based agencies can be powered by this and that the right people can get into this home. So do you want to join me, and do you want to do anything about that and share this good news to other people? So that's an example of what that sounds like, right? In a 5-6 minute pitch. You can boil down years of work and some of the major questions people will have about who's going to get this housing, does it work, won't more people come to our communities, who's delivering it, how does it work in someone's life, how much does it cost, all those things you can squeeze down into that. So make it simple, tell a story. Don't doubt that the power of the solution you have is enough that you can package it into something like that. Number 5, listen to the experts. So I mentioned this up front, and I'll come back to it for a second. Political campaigning is a full-time job. It's a full-time industry, and the reason it is that there is a lot of science behind it. So I talked about the language from pollsters and communications firm. Here I want to talk a little bit on the campaign side. So we'll interrupt our building a movement thing for a little bit on winning a campaign, because it's part of what we want to do on the way to building a movement, right? If I understand correctly, we will also want to win a ballot measure. And there are a couple things that are a little more technical about that than just winning a building a campaign. So here's a basic breakdown. This smushes several categories together of what that takes. You have your base, which is this room, others, true believers, and people who generally are sympathetic and empathetic. You have the movable middle, so when you poll, you'll see people who are on the fence, unsure, kind of supportive, have some questions, or kind of skeptical, but have some questions. And then you have the don't worry about it, which I'll get to in a second. But the base, when you see a lot of conversation about how to get to Democratic women and moms, don't worry that people are over-focusing on something, because Democratic moms are the lifeblood of ballot measures. If we have any Democratic moms in this room, please give yourselves a hand for being the revolutionaries. And so there's a reason why a lot of effort is focused on communicating with them, because a lot of people say we want to vote and we will vote, but most people do not after all that. But Democratic moms do, time and time again. Despite having children, despite having a lot of other things to worry about, they will make time to get to the ballot box or to the mailbox. And so that base beyond this room, if you hear a lot of focus on that demographic, please understand that it comes with years and years and years of work behind that. To point out the gray area, when you're building a movement, you want everyone to be part of it, which I understand. But winning an election, you actually don't need 100%. And I don't know that there's been any election in the history of election where anyone has gotten 100%, even 90% or even 80%. The reason 2/3 is such a high watermark is that 2/3 is basically consensus in the public opinion. And so when you experience someone who has a very strong opinion against it and is angry and is just vicious, and you see them on the message board calling people incredible names, you will have to resist every urge to spend the rest of your evening replying to that one person, which I did for several days before I learned that that's not something you should do. In fact, I was at a supportive housing meeting. The real life version of this is that we were at a supportive housing meeting and we had someone share their story. An incredible story, and she has overcome so much in her life. And she was very vulnerable and honest in saying, you know, I used to be behind a dumpster screaming at people like you. And now I'm here, and housing like this has saved my life. And again, you would never know without her being that honest and vulnerable about sharing that story. The first hand that went up, you know, and so I'm sitting there expecting, you know, of course, if this doesn't move anyone, what does? The first hand that went up was someone saying, how do we keep more people like her on our meds? That was the first question that went up from the crowd. Unbelievable, right? And yet that will always happen. And you will have to resist every urge in your body to know that that is 20, 30% of the crowd, 10, 15%. And our energies are better spent off on people who hear that and are similarly as aghast as we are. And so responding to those things with dignity, with understanding, sometimes with shouting back, but not too much time, because in doing that, the worst thing we can do is spend all of our energies responding there and forgetting about building our base and working on that movable middle. So listen to the experts, focus. What you will also notice, these are the three main buckets that campaigns are built into, which is mail, digital, field. And all of us, if I were to do a quick poll in this room, you would have a favorite methodology. If I ask you, how do you think campaigns are run? Do you think campaigns are run with flyers and slates and mail in your mailbox? Do you think campaigns are run with Facebook ads? Or do you think campaigns are run with doors and phones? We all have a natural preference. I would tell you that most normal people, though, would not go to the preference that most campaign firms do, which is mail. So there's a lot of time and money spent on mail. So if you were to look at a campaign budget, you would be shocked by how much is on mail, and you would think, what's the point of that? And I would just say that, again, there is a place for mail, and it turns out you have to mail people more than once. You can't even just mail people more than once, because what happens the first time you get mail? You throw it in the trash. So repetitions, typically people are mailing 4 to 6 times to get someone to really just even see that. And somehow there's an effect, especially when you're targeting them at key people, like those Democratic moms and others. It matters how you do it, who you do it to. And every campaign firm tends to have a specialty, tends to have an opinion on which is better than the other. But this is a 3-part effort that a lot of people will tilt to on the other side. What they will also say, 3 things that professional campaigners hate more than any other: buttons, lawn signs, and billboards. I share that because these are 3 of our favorite things, naturally. But to campaigners, they often see them as a giant waste of money. In fact, there's an open secret in the campaign world that you put lawn signs and billboards on the way of candidate homes and funders so that they can see them and feel good, but nowhere else, because most people drive by it, and a lot of people you're communicating with are not actually your voters, and they actually cost quite a bit. And so again, when there's pushback and you're not seeing as many billboards as you want, and you're like, is this campaign even working? Mail in people's mailbox are mini billboards that you're kind of sending to the people that you want to be sure and are likely to vote. But let me follow that up immediately with listen to the experts. Sometimes. Let's cheer for the sometimes, because that's where we all come in. Because this is what brings the campaign to life. Because going back to the movement, we want to do more than win an election. We want to build a movement, change the dialogue, as Steve talked about. And that requires more than just things that are cost efficient. So I would tell you, try field, which is a very expensive endeavor. Phones and doors, incredibly expensive. Maybe get a lawn sign or 2. Get those buttons. Take those off the table. Make sure those are well used and well spent. What that will mean, though, I'm actually really glad Steve did this and he wasn't shy about it. What that will mean is that you will all need to contribute to the cause. Because these are things that campaign firms will typically not want to pay for out of their traditional budgets. And so it will take a good amount of fundraising. And if you are a philanthropic funder who has, again, an aim and objective beyond just winning an election, if it's about unleashing communities who have not traditionally been engaged in the process, if you want to extend the reach of deeper conversations beyond just moving the needle, please consider funding those parts of the campaign. We had funders like the California Community Foundation and others really invest in that side of our work and really believe that even if it wasn't the most efficient, that it was important on other immeasurable ways. So never forget that part of the work. And when you do the fundraising, we would typically think rich people, famous people like Magic Johnson, who is a tremendous civic leader and voice for our area, and you would think that's where the money would come. But I would say there is nothing like elected officials in business people. A lot of us are not CEOs or fundraisers because that's hard work. And that is the work that our politicians and business people are engaged in on a daily basis. And that will be the lifeblood of the work. So support your elected officials as they engage their campaign machines and their network. And they really are kind of playing their chips, so to say, and they're investing that for this cause. So support them, send people to those fundraisers, engage in them, work together to raise the funds you need to do that side of it, because that's the fun. Beyond just winning a campaign, winning is fun, but having fun is also fun. Being together is fun, and it's life-giving, and it's important. So even in that, there are also some lower-cost ways that we used. Teletown halls, we had a virtual phone dialer that we had instructions for in our place. We had postcard signing parties, so we combined traditional campaign work and engagement work. So we took the voter lists that were supplied by the campaign, and then we did our own print house, and then we asked on the back of it if we could have people personalize their message to people who are receiving it. So a lot of people had postcard writing. It was a postcard and call parties, postcards and pizza parties. This is an example of one we hosted where people are getting together and those forms of work are coming together. So don't always let the efficient rule. There is value, and there's certainly much power in the involvement and effort that you all have. You have a lot of in-kind resources where if someone were to pay volunteers to do phones and doors, it would be an unseen cost. But your work in doing that is tremendous. One final thing on this is a little bit of an audible. I will say there will come a point probably when you will be asked to email your list and email some very valuable list that you may wonder if they give money to this, will they still give money to my thing? It will be a moment of decision. What I would tell you is that it is not a zero-sum game. I think in your effort to connect the campaign or other efforts to your stakeholders and your leaders, there will be a lift in both parties, because a lot of people do understand that there's the larger work and then there's the particular work. And if you even think about your own donations, there's always a little room for dessert, right? There's always a little extra that people are willing to provide, and it's motivational to all. So I think when that call comes, consider that. And when that does, what it unleashes, these are pictures and places unprompted. You then start to see a ripple effect, and people start to pick it up in their own ways, creating their own events, creating their own videos. It might not be connected to the campaign, and again, resist every urge to control and clamp down, but you will have known when that has bled out, when other people are doing things that you wouldn't have necessarily even wanted them to do, for example, ambushing reporters and starting marches in the streets. The final thing I'll say before I shift to the close is prepare now as if you are going to win this thing. If I were going to say, one thing about what we wish we could have done in Los Angeles, and Mark and Enterprise would probably heartily agree with you, is we wish it kind of came on us and we had a window where the polling was unexpectedly high, we had to jump in. But if we were where you are, and especially given this room, I would tell you, and if you're a board member of a builder, I would tell you, start having conversations at your board about taking risks and growing your capacity to do the work when the money comes. Because when the money comes, you would not believe the expectations that the public has for how quickly the money goes out the door. And of course, that means the capacity that you all have to spend that money. That relates to real project managers on your staff. That relates to real lines of credit on your staff. So if you prepare now, some of the risks you take now will put you in a place, if you start your pipeline and other things, will be so critical to that. Here's a picture in Measure H of what happened. When people typically ask for money, I will always say, what if people actually say yes? What if people actually gave you what you wanted? Then what? We did dream budgets a year ago for our service providers, and often people said, why are we engaged in this exercise? Because this is a little bit of a fantasy trick. Turns out when Measure H passed, their budgets are actually beyond what they dreamed of in their dream budgets. So these are examples of the growth in some of the agencies, and it takes a lot to catch up, and it's something each of us can do to prepare for the eventuality of it. Presume victory, prepare for it, be ready for it, is one thing I would tell you that we didn't do fully, that wish with more time and planning in moments like this someone would have shared with us. All of that said, even as you look forward, I would say don't forget to look inside. You all know in this room better than anyone the effect of supportive housing and affordable housing and homeless services and advocacy, and you know what that does. You know that it's life-saving, and not just life-saving, you know that it's cost-saving, you know that it's dignity-saving, you know that it's soul-saving for all of us as a community, which means that it is us saving. You have seen that, you've lived that, you have fought for that. You know this better than anyone else in San Diego. But it's been hard, hasn't it? It's hard when you're in meetings like the one I was in with Vicki, where the first question people have is how this doesn't destroy our neighborhood. It's hard when people are skeptical that people have dignity or have a chance to recover. It's hard when everything feels so incremental. And so you have been looking for another starfish analogy, because how many times can you tell that starfish story? And so I think a lot of us retreat to thinking one person at a time, one project at a time, one building at a time, because sometimes that's the best we can do. But I would tell you, in this moment, as you think about the next step, it is time to look at the ocean. It is time to lift up our eyes together for a second and think about what could be and what can be. And I would imagine that a lot of you got into this work for that reason. It is, of course, always about the person, but there was a new kind of society that you imagined. You imagined a new kind of living and a new kind of community, and that's why so many of you got into this work. And even though that work has ground us all down, again, this is a moment to breathe and look up. It is no less than turning back the tides of things like redlining that have been a historic scar in our community. And it is no less than a new entire vision for what it looks like to live together. And the red lines today are not drawn just around communities and neighborhoods. The red line today, I would argue, is between the sidewalk and the front door. And what do you believe that looks like to push that inside? And this really is about creating 7,500 more places to flip that red line and to turn that into housing and bring people across that boundary that has kept people outside for so long. It feels like a revolution, and it is. And also, at the same time, it is so simple. This is Carrie Morrison, and if you look at the LA Times, Steve Lopez, who you know as the man behind the Robert Downey Jr. character in The Soloist, he was with us on a trip. We took a delegation to a city named Trieste, which is a mecca for kind of a new psychiatric model that has a lot of similarities with Housing First principles. But it was a global conference, and the LA team presented on a top 14 list. We put up the list of 14 people who are without serious care, would die. And I mean, shocking pictures and shocking conditions. And there was a Q&A portion, and there was silence. There was silence for that portion. And I would say the silence was not surprising, because if we had done that presentation out here, not in this room, but in our communities, it probably would have been met by the same silence. But I was so curious, because I was like, people have to be thinking something. So the Q&A finishes, I tap the shoulder of someone in front of me, and I say, so I just have to know, I'm dying to know, what were you thinking? The person was from Spain, Catalonia. And he just kind of smiled at me, and it was pretty straightforward. He said, it's systematic. No, you just have to give them housing. It was so simple to him. It was so simple to him. And the same thing that causes us to be dumbfounded, overwhelmed, we can't even fathom what changing this would look like. What does it even mean to build and give this amount of housing away? To them, the flip was unbelievable.
Hey, I'm
And
Alfredo.
it was also
Like,
so
boss.
simple for them to consider that.
Nice to meet you.
And the same stunned silence was them thinking
I'm
there
in
was no
Colorado
need to really
Springs.
even,
Yep.
like, of course
hi-
the next step is so
And I've asked
easy,
this
and
question to a
it's
few people,
just
but
a matter of us changing our
How do
minds.
I convince someone?
And that is, this revolutionary thing really is such a simple thing, because it may sound sacrilegious to say this, but it's just money. It's just money. Unlike cancer or other things where we're still searching for the solution, we have a solution, and it just costs us money. And it is just comes down to this question of what is the worth of a human life? And it is amazing to me that for all the people who are against the death penalty, many of them would be okay with letting someone on the street, even if it was a bad decision, even if it were something of their fault or choosing. To let someone die as a result of it is remarkable when we have a solution, and it's a matter of money. I got into this, and for me, that was the moment, the night before the election happened, the results happened. I was sitting there and in prayer, and I'm a deeply competitive person, and I was a track recruit at a top 25 D1 program, and I love competition. I don't mind losing, though. I love competing. I don't mind losing. But on this one, I was like, God, I really want to win, because lives are on the line. It's not just us. It's not just, feeling good. Literally, people's lives are on the line. And that's why I want to win, and that's what this work is about. It is so simple and so serious at the same time. And when I got into this work 10 years ago, I was about to start a nonprofit, but instead felt led into this because it felt like at that time there was a unique alignment in everything, and a unique moment where it felt like God did not want this to keep happening, and that there was something unique happening that we could, and I could be in service of. So it's like start my own thing or be in service at whatever position of this bigger thing that's happening. And that was 10 years ago. I would tell you that so much more now. The mayor of Lemon Grove, was challenging me with this really good question yesterday of saying, describe your keynote to me in one sentence. It was such a good question, and she asked what I was speaking on, and I said, building a movement. And I thought about it for a while, and I said, if I were to sum it up in one statement, I would say, my one statement would be about building a movement is that the movement is here. We don't have to build a movement. If you look outside, the movement is here. And I think what stops us sometimes is what to do about belief and what to do about this work. But the movement is here. And the difference between a mob, though, and a movement is alignment, direction, solution, and hope. And that's what this room can provide to that world outside and that mass of people who want to do something, who will even buy a reasonable solution, even if it's not the best one. And you have that to offer, and that's the power that you can add to building that crowd of people into a movement, and instead of letting it devolve into a mob. The reason I put up this quote is that it is easy to act and not believe, but it's impossible to believe and not act. And this is an image of the DMZ in Korea, where I'm from, and it is the most militarized zone in the world, landmines, troops on every side. But in the middle of that, South Korea started to build a rail line in eventuality and hope that this situation will change. And it's not just kind of a rail line on paper. They have literally built out a station all the way to the border. And you'll see that they've even put signs going to Pyongyang and trains that if that other side was open, that they would go. And so when you think about a real sincere hope and belief, that sincerity of belief is always followed up by preparation and action. And I tell you that that is what this is. Even as radical as providing 75 homes feels for people that other people wouldn't say deserve it, even in the most cynical of places where you know there will be fights, do you believe? Do you believe that starting that on the other side and building homes and building places for cross that red line and come inside may one day met with support, and that you can have the conversation to change that paradigm and change that story? If you believe, then take action, and take real action. Sweat, time, money to make that a different story. And as you do that, remember that people have been taking action on the other side of that. This is a wall we have at events where people write notes to people who are coming inside. And the note I wrote and the line I shared in our victory party was this: and if there's anyone in this room experiencing homelessness still today, what I would say is that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you've had to wait so long and that things have gotten to be this bad for us to consider this set of solutions for you. And so even as we build things on this side of the line, know that people on the other side have been building their own roads and waiting for years, waiting for us to get ready to take this kind of action. And they've held out with the belief that there are people who might provide those kind of homes. Know that that is waiting for you and for us, and that one day those two paths and those two lines might merge. So I will ask you in closing, if you are able to stand, if you will stand with me, and if you'll rise. I know this is going to be an awkward moment, but this will be how you get out of this room. If you will grab the hand of someone next to you, and as you are between tables, maybe you'll even cross some of those divides. And thank you. Squeeze the hand of the person you're holding. Look around you. It may be 13 months before you're assembled in this room again, but probably not, because the Federation will host another conference before. But maybe sometime, this might be the last time you see each other together for 13 months before the victory party. But you will see each other for the victory party if you are able to work together, establish that core, encourage each other, keep each other focused. And to bless you as I go out, I would just tell you, may this web form an unbreakable core. May your hands extend to the movement waiting outside of this room and all the people waiting to be welcomed inside. And may your collective hands show this city what it can be. Thank you. Good luck. God bless you. Be proud, be excited, be terrified. But thank you for letting me be part of this moment.
Wow. So thank you, my God, thank you to Chris Coe for coming here, for sharing so this incredible vision with us, and thank you for making me cry before I have to come back up on stage and talk to y'all. I think it's almost words I can't even begin to talk after that, but I have some things I have to say. So some practical things. One is thank you for all of you who logged on to Homes for SD, Homes number 4 SD. During my talk, we had a sudden surge, a sudden spike in people just going online and signing up. So please keep that surge going. We do need everybody. We do need everybody. It's a digital way of holding hands. So please do that for me. You'll see cards on the table. This is another way you can help us out. It tells you where we are, how to find us, and if you want to give us money, that's how you do that. We need to do this. We need to show our support first. So thank you. Thank you. Also, show up. I mean, a lot of being a movement, a lot of being there is showing up. One of the things that we need to show up for on Monday, 2 p.m., City Council, the action plan on homelessness for the city of San Diego is going to be heard publicly for the first time. Thank you, Chris. We need to be there. We need to let folks know that we support this plan, that this is a plan, this is a way out, and we're willing to put the heft behind the effort, behind this plan to make it happen. So please, if you can't be there, send your council members, the City of San Diego council members, your statement of support for this plan and for linking this plan to the resources, a bond measure that will actually implement it. We've got to do this thing, we can do this thing, and I'm not even going to try to be inspirational after that point. Just please sign that. The practical stuff I've got to talk about here. So and it sounds really banal after what we've just been hearing, please fill out your evaluations. We really rely on the feedback we get from you as far as how we plan next year's session. People give up their time to be peer-to-peer trainers in all of this. They want the feedback too. They want to hear words. The more words you put down, they are going to hear all of the feedback, good or bad. Please share that. They want to know. It's part of their reward for being here is to hear from you what the session's meant to you. We also look forward to our 30th anniversary Ruby Awards. Our party awards are going to be next year in May. We're going to be at the North Park Theater, the Observatory it's now called, but the North Park Theater. It's going to be our biggest Rubies ever. I hope that we can fit almost everybody who's here in there. It's going to be close. It's going to be a little tight, but since we can all stand up and hold hands, we can certainly crowd in the North Park Theater together. Next year's conference is at the Marriott Marquis. You might wonder why we bounce back and forth. It's because Sarah Buchanan, our events person, is so great is always trying to keep it fresh for us. Let me make sure that we thank the serving staffers here today who made this day possible. This is our second day here, and I have to say that I have just been just in awe of the attentiveness, of the ubiquitousness, of just like the hard work and just the hustle of folks who are here. So we really appreciate that very much. With that, we're going to go on. We've got some networking time. The next sessions don't start till 2 p.m. They will go from 2 to 3:15, 3:45 to 5. There's a special happy hour happening in this area from 4 to 5, but then everybody just come on down. 5 o'clock, we're going to have happy hour out here with a view of the harbor. So with that, I'm just going to say, please remember to use the hashtag Building a Movement on social media. Connect with other attendees on Whova. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful time at the San Diego Housing Federation's 2019 Annual Affordable Housing and Community Development Conference. Thank you, bless you, and please enjoy one another's company and treasure it. Thank you.